Good morning. Monday, February 8th. Let's just set our intentions for today by saying the four measurable prayer, as we do every week. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings not be separated from happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment, anger, and aversion. We will end a little early today, like around 10:50 or whatever, 50 after the hour, whatever hour you're on, because of the Garchen Rinpoche Yamantaka retreat that's going on that some of us are participating in. So that's why we're ending a little bit early. I have been asked by one of our classmates here to ask all of you if you would like to send some prayers to a brother of one of our classmates. The brother's name, who has COVID, is Min Vu. So if you would keep him in your prayers, as well as Sharon Leaf, who is also one of our students, who's undergoing a surgery today. Let's start by sitting for 11 minutes, and then we'll read a little bit and talk about stuff. 11 minutes. Okay, let's start. I may talk through some of it, but just continue the practice. Most of you, I'm sure, know how to do it. So sitting in our posture, which we take with dignity and for the benefit of all beings, our seat, relaxed, focusing on the breath. Putting our attention on the space between the nostril and upper lip, focusing on that breath, and when thought comes, which it will, we recognize it and leave it where it is. Go back to the breath. And thus the thought dissolves and back into where it arose from, which is the mind. And we use the metaphor, the visualization of sky being the mind, thoughts being the cloud, sky being unstained, unblemished, clear, limitless. No matter what the thought is, we treat it the same. We use the same technique, no matter what the thought is, no matter what intensity the thought carries. We use the same technique in dealing with it. And if you're using that image of the sky as the mind, you can also almost connect to it as if you're one with it. It's not separate from your awareness. It's not separate from who you are. It actually is who you are, right? The mind. Much more so than the physical body. Remember, emotion, we treat the same way as the thought. Become aware of it, leave it where it is, go back to the breath, settle into the posture. Emotions may have more intensity than thought. Or you can use the analogy of storm as opposed to cloud, but in essence, it's the same thing. It arises from the sky, it dissolves back into the sky. Emotions arise from the mind, dissolve back into the mind. Not separate from the mind, but not made of the same material in a way. Not separate. Like a wave is not separate from the ocean. It's part of the ocean, but you don't it. It's not separate from the ocean. It arises from it. It dissolves back into it. Right. I have a couple of things to read. They're not from books today. They're mostly from Instagram, which is a really good source of daily teachings, and if you subscribe to the right pages. Okay, where is it? The first is from Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, who we've read from in this class in the past. That's him. It's actually from something called Pith Instructions, which is published by Shambhala. Ego chains us like iron shackles. To always desire more than we have is a Mara, M-A-R-A, that inhabits our mind and ruins our happiness. If we can cease to identify with the ego, we are free. If we cannot, it chains us like iron shackles. All this clinging comes from the thought I or me, and from attachment, aversion, pride, and all other thoughts that ego engenders. As long as our identification with the ego persists, we cannot escape samsara. Mara is kind of a demon, I think, some kind of evil kind of spirit, but he's just using that as a metaphor in this case. But I love that. The second quote today is from Lama Zopa, and we've read from him in the past, his book Patience. Actually, Zopa means patience in Tibetan. Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche passed away. There is a reincarnate Lama that he is reincarnated in a younger Lama today who's alive, Lama Zopa Rinpoche is alive and teaches. He's mostly based in Kathmandu, at his monastery there, but I don't think last year, 2020, or right now, he's been traveling, but he does travel. I've had teachings with him in California, Northern California, near Santa Cruz. Pervasive compounding suffering. This kind of suffering happens due to uncontrolled delusions and karma imprinted on our minds. Some of the delusions are carried from previous lives. Some have been accumulated in this life. Whether we can free ourselves from suffering depends on whether or not we can remove these delusions. Therefore, a choice has to be made. Are we going to control these delusions with the mind, or are we surrendering our minds to the delusions? Meditation doesn't stop our consciousness and thoughts. It changes our perceptions of encountering things, people, and emotions. It is a lifelong journey. Sometimes we may seem peaceful, but if the person sitting next to us suddenly disturbs us, anger or negative emotions will instantly arise. Ignorance and action or karma planted the seeds of delusion into our consciousness. If in a past life or this life we have created negative karma by criticizing others with anger or by blindly saying harsh words with ill will, this karma will create the potential for us to repeat these actions as well as result in our receiving similar harm, such as being verbally abused and physically ill. These negative actions plant seeds of delusion in our consciousness, giving rise to mental suffering compounded by the physical suffering of sickness. This kind of suffering, pervasive compound suffering, is the main suffering from which we need to be liberated. We need to free ourselves from samsara, and how fast we can do it depends on our spiritual practice and how we live our lives each day. All the sufferings and delusions originate from the ignorance of grasping I as independently and truly existent. I believe this is from a book called The Four Noble Truths by Lama Zopa Rinpoche. But this really relates to a part of our conversation from last week. We were talking about karma. And, for many of us, karma as a concept, if it's not something that's, we've really kind of studied a lot, it's difficult. For instance, like he says here, if in a past life we have created negative karma, this karma will create the potential for us to repeat these actions as well as result in receiving similar harm, such as being verbally abused and physically ill. And a lot of people, have difficult reconciling the fact that in a past life you committed an action that you're paying for in this life, right? So someone gets ill or something happens, and it being the result of negative karma created in a past life, I think some people feel that's unfair or they have a difficulty accepting that. But this concept of karma cannot be viewed separately from how the self is perceived in a Buddhist perspective. And that's really, really important. For a detailed exploration of that, of the self from a Buddhist perspective, what is the self? Go to Dr. Vesna Wallace's class that she did with us. I think, that was Meditation 102. I forget which session number, maybe 11 or 12. But that's on the IGTV and YouTube. Because, in a Buddhist perspective, the self doesn't really exist as we know it to exist. In many ways, it doesn't exist at all. And it's a certain way we perceive who we are, or who we think we are, based on a lot of conditioning and a lot of habituation and a lot of different aspects that we cobble together into this ego and formation that we think of as ourself. Because if there's no self, right, then what is being reincarnated? If it's not the self, if it's just purely mind, purely consciousness, you're not reborn necessarily with the knowledge of being the son or daughter of this person or that person in the state of or country of, in the time period of, and if in a sense of physical science, time is abstract, then it's not even necessarily a linear time frame that you're being reincarnated in. So I look at it more as something energetic. So like this energetic stream that continues, that can either be charged positively or negatively, depending on how we act, how we act with body, speech, and mind, what gets created through those actions. There's a couple more readings I want to do, but we can talk a little bit. I have a friend who loves soccer, but he struggles with feeling angry and upset when his team loses. He's very interested in Buddhism and practicing mindfulness, but finds football to be a stumbling block. He doesn't want to give up football, but he needs to figure out a way to feel such intense emotions. Do you have any advice? Yeah, I don't know. Practice harder. Practice Buddhism harder. I mean, that's a metaphor for everything. We don't want to feel such intense emotions around anything. I mean, in a negative way. I mean, you want to feel, if you want to feel intense love and compassion, that's a different. I mean, like anger and jealousy and hatred and all those things. That we want to lessen. But I would imagine the intensity of those negative emotions would be in direct proportion to the amount of practice he does. If there's no self and feelings are not real, then what do we do in times we deserve to have those extreme emotions? When a loved one passes, in my perspective, we deserve to have those feelings. Well, I don't know what deserving feeling. I mean, it's just natural. Of course, when a loved one passes, you feel grief. I mean, that's grief is an aspect of love, and I mean, there's an element of attachment as well. I would imagine an enlightened being might not necessarily feel grief because he understands, the bigger picture that death is not real, right? But I think what we're trying to work with, at least in our level as practitioners here, is dealing with negative emotions, which I don't necessarily think grief is. I think that's something natural, and so somebody we love passes, we're going to feel that loss. I mean, like I said, an enlightened being may experience grief and probably does very differently, but I wouldn't know that. You know, so what we're really concerned with and what we're working on through this practice of meditation is really dealing more with negative emotions and not being a slave to them. Not creating negative karma by indulging in them. That's my opinion on that. I've recently gone cold turkey after a few years of heavily daily cannabis abuse. I was wondering if you have any advice for not falling back to it. I mean, any kind of drug abuse, it really helps to get, I would imagine, professional help, or, some kind of therapist that specializes in that. Because it's very hard, you know. I'm sure practicing, Dharma and meditation I don't see why it would hurt. I would imagine it could only help. But any kind of drug abuse or any kind of addiction, I think it really helps to have some kind of professional help in that respect. I'm trying to find ways to clear my mind to help be more creative. Does meditation help your creativity? That's a really good question. I get asked that all the time. And I don't really know how to answer that. You know, um, I don't meditate to be creative, to be honest. So I can't really answer that one way or the other. I don't see how it would hurt. Um, and I'll also be honest, I don't separate meditation from Dharma practice, Um, I don't do meditation just on its own in a way. It's really a component to practice of Dharma and being a Buddhist. So I don't really separate it from that. It's fine if you do, if anyone does. Like I said, you don't have to be a Buddhist to do this class. You don't have to be a Buddhist to listen to talk about Dharma. You don't have to be a Buddhist to meditate. If you just want to take that component of meditation in your practice, and that's fine. Why don't you let us know, Tyrone? Why don't you use meditation consistently? I mean, the important thing about meditation is really making it, a regular practice. And you report to us and see how it's affected you, your creativity. Okay. I'm going to read a little more. Sorry, just give me a minute. 1, 2, 3. Okay, this is from the Dalai Lama. The Madhyamaka tenet system, as explained by the Indian sage Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna was an Indian Buddhist scholar, I guess. The first, which is common, he speaks of 3 levels of dependent arising. The first is causal dependence. Causal dependence. The fact that products, conditioned things, depend on causes. A table depends on the wood, which is its substantial cause, which actually turns into the result, and the people who make it, who are the cooperative condition that helps to bring about the result. Similarly, our body, mind, and present rebirth depend on their respective causes and conditions. Such dependency rules out the possibility of things arising haphazardly without cause. It also precludes things arising due to discordant causes, things that do not have the ability to cause them. Barley cannot grow from rice seeds. Happiness does not come from destructive actions. In addition to chemical, biological, and physical causality, karma and its effects is another system of causal dependence, cause and effect. Karma is volitional activities done physically, verbally, or mentally, body, speech, and mind. These causes bring their effects, the rebirths we take, our experiences in our lives, and the environment in which we are born. The second type of dependency is dependent designation, which has 2 branches, mutual dependence and mere designation by term and concept. Mutual dependence refers to things existing in relation to each other. Long and short, parent and child, whole and parts. Our body, which is a whole, depends on its parts, arms, legs, skin, internal organs. The organs and limbs only become parts in dependence upon the body as a whole. A hard spherical object the size of a small apple becomes a baseball only because there is the game of baseball, a pitcher, a batter, and a bat. Apart from this context, this round object would neither be called a baseball nor function as a baseball. A parent is identified only in relation to a child, and someone becomes a child only in relation to a parent. Neither the parent nor the child exists independently of each other. On a daily basis, we use conventions and terms and engage in actions based on language. Doing this does not require there be a direct one-to-one objective referent for each of them. Rather, terms are defined relationally and derive meaning only in the context of mutually dependent relations. That feeds into what we're talking about, the self, how we contextualize the self. I am the son of so-and-so, right? We give labels. I am an American. I am a man. I am, these things only exist in terms of the other, right? I say I'm a man because there's a relationship between male and female, or they're different, these are things we use language to define, But ultimately, all these things don't really touch the essential nature, right? The mind, consciousness, that which is indestructible, unborn, undying, that always existing, not created, not destroyed. One more reading. This is from Zansar Khyentse Rinpoche, who has a really good book called Not for Happiness, has a really good book called What Makes You Not a Buddhist. This is a really good book. The sutras liken reincarnation to the relationship between teachers and students. A singing teacher teaches students how to sing. His students learn techniques and benefit from direct experiential advice from their teacher. But the teacher doesn't remove a song from his throat and insert it into a student's mouth. Similarly, reincarnation is a continuity of everything we have learned, like lighting one candle from another, or a face and its reflection in a mirror. I like that analogy of lighting one candle from another. So now you have a new flame. It's of that first flame, but it's not the same. Now there's two different flames, but they're of the same nature. Big concepts, no? Is suffering part of the human condition? How do we approach suffering from a meditative perspective? The first noble truth, the very first teaching of the Buddha is that in life there is suffering. So from a Buddhist perspective, suffering is definitely part of the human condition. How do we approach suffering from a meditative perspective? We approach suffering from a Buddhist perspective by practicing the Eightfold Path, which is the fourth noble truth, right? Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right meditation, right concentration. And to know what all those right things are, you have to study the Dharma. How to use meditation as a means to handle depression. Seasonal depression this year has been a struggle and a half. I don't really know what seasonal depression is. And I think depression as a clinical psychological thing really helps be, I think that can be a very serious issue that needs professional help with. If it's really something serious in your life, a therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever. I don't really know how to use meditation as a means to handle depression. I know meditation as a means to handle thought, relate to thoughts, deal with thoughts and emotions and stuff. But if it's really something that's causing you a lot of problems, you need it helps to have professional help. I would not forego that. I am inspired by your shrine. Do you recommend any items or tools that are essential? This can be personal. It's really whatever inspires you, as a Buddhist, I'm inspired by teachers. Those photographs are all, Buddhist teachers. Some that I've known, some that I haven't, but I've heard their teachings. So, in Buddhist practice, it's pretty specific. Image of the Buddha, image of the Buddhas and the teachers. That's really up to you. Okay. We're going to sit for 9 minutes. Just always remember when you sit, not so much during the sitting, but when you sit, before you start or as you start, just remember that it really helps to have the intention that whatever merit comes from sitting is for the benefit of all beings. We all are very much focused on ourselves, and that's natural, but that's what the view, right view, we were talking about the Eightfold Path, right view, that's part of it. Great, thank you. And thanks for bearing with us for the short nature of today's class. The retreatants, thank you. And next week we're going to meet on Sunday, not Monday, this time, 10 a.m. Okay. Let's dedicate the merit from today's class. By this merit, may all beings attain the state of enlightenment and conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May they be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Thank you, Nick. Thank you all. See you next week.